The add-on apocalypse is real. Blizzard is putting WoW's life in the line here, just like they're doing with the class changes, and they have gone further and faster than we expected. And with that, many are arguing that Blizzard are going too far. So, to get a sense of that, here's how, air quotes, bad it is. Blizzard have destroyed so much add-on functionality that the weak aura developers have decided to completely give up. Yes, that is right. They say that with the Midnight pre-patch, the entire weak auras add-on will be dead. Their development work on it will cease. It'll still be a thing for Classic, but what that could mean for you is no more boss auras to sell fights for you. No more custom class HUDs, just the way you like them. No more don't release warnings that I know we have plastered all over our screens during Raid. That's all going to be gone. Weak auras is not the only victim of this. Raid frames like Cell and Voodoo are being gutted, and healers, understandably, are in extreme doom mode right now. Healing is heavily UI dependent, and what's on alpha right now doesn't really look like it'll make for an amazing healer UI. Though of course, alpha is, after all, alpha. But some people are fighting back. The author of DBM has already given feedback that has saved important add-ons. Yes, literally. So there is a lot of good news in this story. There's some spooky stuff. What I can though say for sure is that this is a bigger deal than any of us were bracing for. So let's get into it in all of its glorious detail. So, what's dying? Well, when the alpha launched, we quickly found out what Blizzard had changed. Essentially, add-ons can't read anything about your character's combat state anymore. They can't see your health, they can't see your cooldowns, can't see your buffs, can't see your debuffs. They will know if you're fighting an enemy, but they actually can't even tell what enemy you're fighting, never mind anything else. And to kill any workarounds, add-ons are actually banned from reading or sending chat messages in combat. So they can't see a dialogue line from a boss and then, I don't know, use that as a timer, use that to do some coordination. There's other things they can't do, like see anything in the combat log. So with that, what's the damage? Well, basically, any add-on that shows combat information is completely dead, at least in its current form. Weak auras obviously is hit, DBM and bigwigs are hit, GTFO can't read debuffs to warn you if you need to GTFO. OmniCC can't do anything about your cooldowns, and then there's your party and raid frames. Cell, Healbot, and Voodoo. They're all gone, at least in their current form. And that means that this is what CurseForge may look like in patch day. A complete massacre. Any single add-on you use that touched even a little bit of combat info, a tiny bit, will need drastic reworking from its developer. And if add-on devs bother, there's plenty they could work around, but they'll still be missing many of the features they would have completely relied on. And what that means is this: what's left for add-ons to work with is going to be a fraction of what we're used to. The other big question, what is surviving? Well, the answer is almost anything outside of combat has survived this purge. Your bag add-on is fine. Plumber's many glorious functions like the loot window, those things will work. Role-playing add-ons will survive. Handy notes, auctionator, MDT, dialogue UI, and chat add-ons, those things are all untouched. They will be okay. And a ton of the dead add-ons can actually survive in a way. They'll just have to kind of rebirth themselves, do the whole Phoenix thing. Even bigwigs and DBM have actually confirmed they will ship their add-ons for Midnight. They're just going to be different. Bigwigs actually posted this clip showing off their timeline and bar options over on the actual real alpha. And in those shots, everything looks great and works fine. But there is a huge difference. Bigwigs, the add-on, doesn't actually know what any of these abilities are. It can display these things, but it doesn't know what they are. You see, Blizzard still lets these add-ons see combat information, just with a twist. They're now called secrets, so add-ons basically know something is there, but they don't know what that thing actually is. So bigwigs, for example, will know that there's an ability coming in, but the actual add-on won't even know what that ability is called. Now, bigwigs could change the font or the position of the text. It could change the icon, but there's a lot it can't change, and that means it will be different from what you experience now. It can't change the name. And how could it change the name of something it doesn't know the name of? It can't count it down with text-to-speech. It can't check the name against a list and maybe send you an alert to spread, to soak, or to taunt. And the same goes for things like your own health. A raid frame add-on can still show you how much health you have, but the add-on can't do anything with your health number because the add-on doesn't actually know how much health you have, even though it can display that. So it can't, as an example, check if anyone is at 30% health and then make the frame glow red. And this has got massive implications for healers. Healer frames will often highlight certain debuffs or put specific buff icons in specific places. And they won't be able to do that now, because while they may know something is there, and they may be able to do some things with its visual appearance, they don't actually know what is there or much information about it. And that applies to player health just as it applies to buffs or to debuffs. And there's one major victim. It's you guys, the Resto Druids. You see, their mastery scales with how many buffs they've got on a target, so unless Blizzard add that to their UI through a tracking buff, then add-ons can't possibly know anymore. And that means there's a huge informational nerf. And this isn't just your raid frames. Nameplates are in the same boat as well. And that's what takes me to the developer of Plater. He's not full-on dooming, because you will still be able to change the sizes, the colors, the fonts, and everything else, but you won't be able to do things like filter out information, or do anything custom based on what any given value is. And that would include things like cutting down text. So if you have 1,000,000 health, you can't even change it to say 1M instead of, whatever way it would display by default. And that's the kind of restriction that to many people feels pointless and is actually causing uproar. And by uproar, I really do mean it. It is loud. The response then. Some players are not happy about how far Blizzard have gone, and because of that, there's been a lot of pushback. Of course, there's the other side of things. There are people, getting a little bit of joy and fun out of other people being really angry about something that matters to them. A lot of standard internet trash is obviously mixed up in this video. I just want to keep it focused on the goddamn issues, because that's actually the bit that matters. Now, the Weak Auras devs made a giant post saying their farewells, and that was obviously an animating point within the community. And in their post, they say that they just don't want to do the work necessary to make Weak Auras usable, because that would mean ripping out loads of features and rewriting tons of code. They could do it, but their reward for that effort would be a heavily neutered version of the add-on that I have to assume they love developing. So understandably, that's not something they've got an interest in making. Going back to their post, it continues with a fairly pointed and sad tone. It describes the years and years of genuine effort that they and other combat add-on developers have put in, all for Blizzard to just move on, leave them behind. I mean, it reads a little bit like a protest mixed in with an emotional goodbye, and their post ends with something that almost looks like a list of demands, or perhaps a list of suggestions. And that's understandable as well. As they point out, Blizzard said that they would, quote, ease in to restrictions. Instead, Blizzard have dropped a nuke, one that I think they may have came to realize is necessary for the new world that they want to build. Personally, I almost wonder if this is Blizzard just trying to rip the band-aid off instead of going inch by inch by inch, trying to boil the frog, with, I guess, Weak Auras being the frog. But right now, there's a lot of other developers who are fighting this more directly. Bigwigs is also pushing back in this. They're asking for more features, specifically things like pushing back to filter abilities. They're also asking people to be vocal with Blizzard for other things, like ability renaming. And an explicit example of that is players naming an ability from whatever Blizzard have called it, which will be full of, flavor, vibes, designer's intent, and just renaming it to something like Soak, so that players actually know what to do, because they don't want an ability name, they perhaps want an instruction. And maybe they want that because it increases the clarity of combat, and that could be one of the reasons why they'd install that add-on in the first place. Now, the DBM author has made videos with very specific and very fair feedback, which I think is really, really strong. And he's already seen some successes here. And this, guys, is great news. Originally, add-ons were banned completely from reading and posting in chat when your character is in an instance. Now, this stops some extremely powerful things in combat, like chat bubble markers or yelling instructions. But what it also breaks is important things like RC loot cancel, break timers, and fun add-ons like the gambling that people do in between fights. And the good news is that with that feedback being made, Blizzard have already announced that they will fix it. And not only that, they've outlined what they're going to do, where the chat restriction will now only be in combat, as opposed to just always being on when you're in an instance. And that means that during break or between bosses, you can still gamble with your friends and handle loot with an add-on. Moving on though, the DBM author also argues they've gone too far on personal things like character health or character buffs. Now, he says that removing debuffs and combat log is enough to basically nuke the computational add-ons that Blizzard wants to get rid of. That's basically where add-ons or things like weak auras can be used to do a bunch of the thinking for you. He's essentially saying Blizzard have dropped a Moab in something that they could have just sniped, right? That they could have been more precise, and that having some more leniency on the personal stuff like health would allow for way more customization. But I have a suspicion that Blizzard won't relent. I almost think Blizzard are drawing a line in the sand here. I think they think that this might be necessary for the new world, the new direction they want to take the game in. And I think they know it will upset players. I mean, anywhere you go, there is insane anger, either at the change or because of the change or at someone who themselves is angry at the change. You know, it's fun. And Team Liquid's #1 firebrand, THD, has said that this is like Covenant 2.0. And as reductionist as that may sound, I think you can actually see some sense in it. You see, even if we set some of the like logical and sort of developer like engineering stuff aside, emotionally, I think to many, it feels like Blizzard are deciding what's best for us. And that's maybe what reminds people of Covenants, right? And that's the thing that to many is horrifying. Because until Dragonflight changed how Blizzard made the game, anytime Blizzard was stubborn, well, there would be bad news. Of course, what Blizzard are counting on is that if they're stubborn here, what we will get is a better game. Okay, Blizzard's new world. So in Midnight, it will be impossible to get a competitive advantage in combat by downloading an add-on. That is basically how it stands as of the time of this video. Add-ons cannot alert you to having low health or low mana. They cannot tell you to GTFO because they do not know what you are standing in. They can't flash your screen when you get an important debuff. If you want to coordinate kicks or cooldowns within your group, you're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way, over voice or in chat before the fight. Add-ons are now cosmetic only, and they have taken every step necessary to make that possible. It seems clear to me that their opinion is something along the lines of, if they were any less defensive, that basically add-on developers would find a way around things. They're basically saying, yes, we could perform some surgery, but we know you guys are really smart, and that's why we're just dropping a bomb on it instead. But here's the thing, there's a difference between a battle and a war, and I think Blizzard is happy to lose a bit of the PR battle if it means them winning the war. Because while they're being defensive against add-on devs, they are doing so as a part of a strategy that I would characterize as being extremely aggressive. Put one way, you could say they're doing a massive amount of damage to their combat ecosystem. Because think about that, ecosystem. They're introducing change that just impacts every part of that ecosystem. And this is change the likes of which WoW has literally never seen before. Almost every seasoned player will log into a game with their experience nerfed. At least that's how it may feel immediately. Less highlights, less clear information. You'll see an ability name where you previously would have just seen soak, spread, taunt. It'll be a game with zero add-on handholding. And if you think about some of the fights that you've done in the last 10 years, that might be a scary thing. Because frankly, we all know Blizzard have had to throw bullshit at us because they know we've been using all of these add-ons. There's a reason why, over years, we have characterized it as the add-ons arms race. An arms race between the developers and the add-on makers. Now, in the form of personal auras, Blizzard had a solution that I suppose they thought would have been surgical enough to solve the problem. It obviously didn't. Hence, dropping bombs. Bombs that mean we will log into a game that will be different. Years of customizing combat UIs will be completely gone forever, at least in the way in which we had been doing it. People who have played with, say, Luxthros UIs will be left using something else, and perhaps that will be the new cooldown manager profiles that he builds for them. Just it won't be the weak auras, and it won't be as powerful. And the same thing will go with nameplates. Even if Plater does survive, it's not going to look the same, it's not going to feel the same. And that is the biggest risk that Blizzard are taking. That feeling, that sense in the first month of playing Midnight after it comes out, where you don't have the things that you were used to. And even if you believe, like many people do, that an add-on-less WoW is better, and I'll be honest, I am somewhat partial to that opinion, at least for some issues, some cases. And personally, I rated the last tier without weak auras and without boss mods, did just fine. But obviously, it is a massive shift to what people are used to. The pain will be felt up front. The reward that will be later, because it's not just add-ons that are changing, it's also the combat changes. They are sweeping, and they're another part of this. And when we put these parts together, we can start to see what Blizzard are doing. There's the combat changes, there's the death of add-ons, but the other side of that is the new default UI. Blizzard's entire plan hinges on their new default UI being ready, and many simply don't believe that. And that means some players are scared. And to be clear, on alpha already, the nameplates and boss alerts actually look great. The cooldown manager has got alerts for things like abilities coming off cooldown, even dots entering the pandemic window. There's a lot that's working quite well, and Blizzard are even working on the personal resource display, which can be used to properly show your resources. And those parts are either good to go now or close enough that I think they will be ready by launch. But the thing is, that all requires having faith in Blizzard. You know, if you're someone who's worried about this and wants to feel better about it, I mean, what are your options? It's either get Blizzard to stop this plan, or it's hope that their plan pays off in the end. And I say faith because there's a lot we haven't seen, like the damage meters. Those are not ready for the alpha, even though they will have to ship by launch. And most worrying is the actual raid frames, which are extremely important for healers at all levels. There's just no major update coming for those, it seems. In the developer Q&As, improvements were announced, but there's no sign of them right now. That's worrying, and that's why healers are being vocal about the things they will need from Blizzard's new solution. But of course, there's no guarantee they'll get any of it. Blizzard have promised they'll make sure this UI is ready before the great add-on purge. Right now, we can't see all of that UI, so we don't know if it will be ready, and that means all we've got to go on is what we see in alpha and trust in Blizzard's ability to deliver. Trust, which rather obviously not everyone has a lot of. Personally, I've got a lot of trust that it's actually a good vision. Where I begin to have trust issues is the minutiae of some of these features and whether that will actually be ready for a real live game environment. Biggest worry probably being the healer side of things. Now, personally, I think Blizzard's overarching direction for World of Warcraft is actually a good one. I think in a world where computational add-ons are less of a thing and people have actually got to play the game as designed, I actually think we can get a way more fun game. And recently, yes, I've been playing without boss add-ons. I've just been looking at the fight, listening with my ears, and honestly, it's been fairly great. Mana Forge Omega was a blast. I didn't feel like I needed add-ons, but again, that's just me doing heroic curve raiding with my friends, recreationally, not ultra competitively. If I was doing Mythic recreationally, maybe I'd have a different opinion, but maybe that opinion would be based on my current needs and how those would be supplied, would be fulfilled by add-ons. And if I was that person, what would I not know? What the demands of Mythic raiding in the future will be. And the same would go if I was, say, hypothetically into competitive Mythic Plus. Those are the players for whom these add-ons tend to be the most important. So essentially, there's a paradigm shift. But before that's interrogated, there is the unfortunate part of this, and that is the collateral damage and the players who likely won't be able to join us in this new journey. One group is up in arms, rightfully so, and that's the accessibility crowd. You see, players with various disabilities currently rely on tons of add-ons to essentially level the playing field, like limited sight. You see, there's a guild called Undaunted, and they're pretty awesome. They are a mythic raiding guild for the hard of hearing, and they posted about how much damage these new restrictions will do for disabled players. And that's because loads of them use weak auras to add audio, to change colors, or to otherwise get over disabilities. Now, unless Blizzard successfully unveil a huge plethora of options or design changes, well, those players won't be able to play anywhere near the same level in Midnight. This is a serious side effect, but it's actually a feature, not a bug. Blizzard are leveling the playing field for players. That means removing advantages from everyone. And included within the definition of everyone is disabled players. The people who really do need add-ons in a way that the rest of us kind of don't. And where a computational add-on could trivialize a mechanic, well, for them, it could actually make that mechanic actually be accessible and actually make their gameplay viable. And right now, those players are just being left behind. And that quite simply just sucks. Okay, is this a good idea? At the end of the day, I think Blizzard are being insanely gutsy here. I really do think that this is a big balls move. They are optimizing for what they think is the best game, and maybe for new players or players who are a bit more willing to change their mind. And I think they're doing that to ensure that World of Warcraft has a future. And I think they're also optimizing for the silent majority. That's the thing. I always have in mind when I do a video that if I look at the comments, if I look at my Twitter or whatever, I'm not seeing the silent majority. I'm not hearing you, even though the silent majority is the vast majority of who I'm actually speaking to. And as applied to World of Warcraft, well, they could be the tons and tons of people who play the game without ever seeking out add-ons or any online discussion. Though there's another way to frame it, and it's quite simply that with these changes, Blizzard thinks they'll be able to make a better game that's way more fun. To them, their design space has probably just got way better. Maybe it means they don't need to throw in as many random swirlies to just pressure players' working memory because they know that all these players are using add-ons, and if they didn't throw something random bullshit in to pressure their working memory, then the add-on would just completely remove any thinking out of the fight, and it would be boring as hell. But obviously, without add-ons, they're thinking about how fights could be more fun, and that could mean parts of WoW design that we just have to get around with add-ons, well, we don't need to get around them with add-ons anymore, because without add-ons, those things won't need to exist. That's the kind of entirely new vision of World of Warcraft that they, I think, want to put forward here. And if I step back from the situation and try to think about things in first principles, I agree. I agree with their direction. I think it will be better for World of Warcraft as a game. But World of Warcraft as a game, for you, in the way that you play it, your experience with your friends, your habits, your muscle memory, well, that's an entirely different thing. And that's the risk that they are taking. We genuinely will not know what happens until we're at the other side of that change. But I do think if Blizzard gets the add-on purge right, gets their own game UI right, and gets the new combat direction right, along with encounter design, along with dungeon design, and delve design, and all the other things, that we could end up with a way more fun game. But that requires a lot of moving parts to all come out right at the same time. And in a world where we don't really know what's going on with the damage meters, where we're not really sure what's going on with our raid frames in Midnight, I can certainly not blame anyone for not trusting Blizzard to nail that. I completely understand that. All we can do is watch the alpha unfold and try to steer Blizzard in the right direction. I do think that will mean a few more concessions beyond the ones that they've at least made thus far in the alpha. So I've got to kind of break the whole me doing the video thing and just kind of say, there's one thing. I have a sense that you might feel quite disappointed now that you've reached the end of this video, where it just doesn't really feel like it's all came together. And I think that's because there's another piece. That piece is the class changes. And I think you really need to get the class changes to understand this whole direction. And the good news is we've done a video on that. And don't worry, it's not like me back in the day reading out patch notes. There's a lot of synthesis. If you want to get how classes are changing, I think that video is the one that will get you to that place. And after you understand those changes, I think a lot of what's going on with add-ons and encounter design will also make sense as well.